Hey, welcome back everyone. So in this one, I want to focus on the shoulder area. I'll do a little bit with the forearm here, but I just want to point out a few things that I'm trying to take note of in my studies, and hopefully it helps you out as well. So essentially, one of the things that I'm trying to really zero in on when I do these studies is that the shoulder is not evenly across. There's a higher point to the anterior head, the rear head, or was it posterior, anterior, right? So posterior being the back, that's lower. The medial head being larger and more predominant, especially from a view like this. And then also the way that it comes down and points towards the bicep. And then also the other thing I'm trying to point out here and take note of is that if you look at the spina scapula in relationship to the collarbone, clavicle, you can see that jump, and it really almost has an indication of the slope to the deltoid, but also where the trapezius would come in. So it's all these, the height increase of the head right there, and then the transition to the back. It's all there. So that kind of red line is just a landmark to show you a path that should hopefully help you to visualize that a bit better. And it's also important too, because when we get that sloping of the back from the trapezius, that's kind of a tough area for a lot of us to get right. I know it is for me. And then that curvature to the neck, all this kind of, this area right there is pretty tricky to get right. And I think it all kind of starts with maybe that red line, it kind of helps anyways. You'll see a lot of that stuff pointed out in the Anatomies for Sculptors, the book. I think it's a series now. They've got a lot of good illustrations for similar areas like this. So anyways, I want to show you that, and then I also wanted to do a little bit of lighting here, just because I actually started with cross-hatching, but then I started to blend it. I like doing both. And it just gives you a better sense of the volume. And so I think these types of volume studies are helpful to do every now and then. And as I mentioned, you could do this with cross-hatching as well. I like playing with both. I'll even cross-hatch this and then blend it. Seems to do about the same. It's actually a little bit more of a controlled kind of feeling when I do that. So I'll put in these lines sort of like I'm getting ready to cross hatch, and then just blend them, smudge them around. But I do try to pay attention to the cell shading kind of effect that I'm getting as I do this. So I'm looking at the banding of the value, not just going for a smooth gradient, because obviously I could just jump in with an airbrush and do that much quicker. So I'm actually trying to create a little bit of a feeling of banding as I smudge this around. I really want that darker area right through the middle. And I want a bit of definition right here. You could bring some lines this way. Start to build up some of that depth there. Okay, and I know this is it's probably slowing the process way down for you, but I don't know. I get a lot of people like, hey, I want everything in real time, so I feel like I shouldn't time lapse this for you, but it is very repetitive. And there's times I feel like when I'm doing this that I'm like, Did I just go back a step and I'm like redoing the same thing? Did I smudge too much? You know, that kind of thing. So it's back and forth, and then also pulling in and out and really looking at it back here. So like I'm looking at this other one that I did, and I like the lighter, you know, bounce light down here. But yeah, it's getting that just right. And I also like how it's darker through the middle. So I would keep going until I get that similar effect. Increase the brush size just a little bit. I also like pushing the angles back and forth. So you can probably see it right here where it goes like this, and like this. Sometimes just those little shifts and angles here and there can make the anatomy feel more interesting versus, you know, getting, you don't want this. I've got a little too much of that going on, these like ovals everywhere in the highlights, and that's kind of boring, right? It doesn't look like real anatomy. So I really do like doing these value studies. I feel like they, even though I do predominantly do cross hatching and ink work and things like that, I feel like these are insanely helpful for just visualizing and thinking about these forms and volumes more, more dimensionally, more three-dimensionally. So that's really why I do it. I mean, I obviously do some digital painting, and this is very in tune with that. But that's really not why I'm doing it here. It's more of an exercise that I do just because, again, it helps me to really think about these parts of the anatomy in a more three-dimensional way on the page. And the shoulder is, I don't know, very easy for me to get wrong. And so that's why I'm constantly revisiting it, constantly trying to pick up on the subtleties and the nuances of what it is I'm not quite getting. It's an ever-evolving practice and study. So what I wanted to point out with the arm over here, and I think it does play into the shoulder, which is why I wanted to illustrate it in this kind of like robot looking drawing over here, is that there's a staging of the anatomy. So I'm going to put this on a different layer. And I want to say I did pick this up from Anatomy for Sculptors, but I'm not sure. It's more and more apparent once it's like one of those things. Once you see it, you really don't unsee it. But it's this staging or staggering, stepping effect that you get to this part of the anatomy, and it's super important to get right. And then what it does, it makes you think a little bit differently about the deltoid. Like I mentioned with this part up here, it points into the bicep. You know, you got a medial head through here. You know that it's not just one big shape. You also know that there's a slope here from the back, the spine of scapula up to the collarbone. There's a sloping of the shoulder. So much so to where people actually get a round over here, and then you gotta have chiropractic adjustments, and you get people that work out and they talk about this sloping. The physical trainers, personal trainers will actually help people with this sloping of the shoulders. People with our type of work and sitting at desks actually suffer from it more. So bring those shoulders back. But all that is stuff you can think about. So when you go to draw it, it's like, okay, so I'm not going to draw it like this. I'm probably going to think about it more like this. So just that little bit of slope that you would get there. It's probably something more like that. So you can see that just as I started, I went kind of like this. Now another thing is the shoulder looks pretty much like, you'll hear it compared to, what is it? Pumpkin. Pumpkin's probably the wrong one to think about. Clove of garlic, garlic cloves. I tend to always say like a heart because it points down here, or like a crooked heart, more like this. So whatever these shapes help you, but the main thing is if it's too even here to here, again, that's probably a sign that it's not quite right. So let's go back to, I think this part's not bad. We say, all right, it does dip down lower and kind of intersect into that area. And then, we see that the interior head is up higher. And the medial head is going to be lower, but it's bigger. If we go back like this, it also tapers kind of down into this point. It's wider, tapers down into there. And then the posterior head, or rear delt, is going to be a lot more, sloped in, kind of behind the medial head, something like that. Again, because of that slant that we're aware of over here. So, and I don't know if this is correct. I'm not pulling from reference at this instance. So what I'm doing here is I'm trying to impart ideas onto, share ideas with you. And it's not in place of reference. It's just a set of ideas that you can call upon when you're drawing from your own imagination. But always table that with, it could be wrong, right? Like, you want to check reference every time you can, and then reinforce your own ideas so that you can draw imaginative works of art without, being too overly critical. I mean, sometimes you're just going to wing it, right? That's just the way it is. But, and sometimes it'll look really cool. Other times you'll look back and go, oh, what was I thinking there? But that's where you go back and you train yourself to start spotting these areas. I'm just kind of sculpting this, by the way. I don't know if this is right, but now, and the other thing is too, a lot of times you'll have something that's pretty good and it just needs a tiny shift for like kind of the depth portion. And that's really where I wanted to show you these as well. Like, these shapes would probably look pretty funny as a straight silhouette. Let's see what they look like. Again, this is that kind of heart shape that I see right there. Obviously not a complete heart. This one looks a little bit more like it, like that. But it's very different once you think about it with this pocket of depth and dimension, right? It's a lot more noticeable. It's a lot more distinct for what we're looking at. So what I'm saying is, when you come over here for this, you could have this shape kind of close, and then all you might need is a little shift to the angle, like something like this. Try to point this out if I can. And then once that shadows properly, give it the right amount of depth, it might fill in and look pretty darn good. But it might not look right as a 2D line version. So, and that's what I'm saying. Sometimes these little shifts in angle, here and there, make all the difference in the world for that shadow. And so I'll show you what I mean, but hopefully that makes sense to you. Let's take and just get rid of this. And I'll clean this up real quick, and then I'll add some shadow to it. Okay, something like that. Try that. I'm going to cut this way down. That interior head feels a bit odd. I guess what we could do is think about, okay, where is the collarbone? because then it gives us that landmark for where the anterior head would be. You get that clavicular fossa right about there. Okay, so let's say something like that. And then we'll add some value to this real quick. But again, I would think pretty basic about it at first. I'd find this point of where we want to apply the shadow. Have it fade down. Remember, this is the same way you could think about it for your cross hatching if you want. And I'm doing this faster than I normally would. I'm usually pretty slow as it pertains to my rendering, but, or I shouldn't say slow, I'm careful. Let me put it that way. I'm doing it a bit faster just to speed up for the video. So don't feel like you need to go this fast is what I'm saying. Quality over speed. Okay, and then, if I was going to render it, I would probably blue line it again and just start cross-hatching with an ink style. But I'm going to go ahead and go with more of a value study on this one. And I do place the values on a different layer. That way I can keep my line art intact as I start to smudge. Well, that's probably just a preference. And you see it starts messy at first, but as you do a couple revisions, you can get this to look really nice and clean. It's more about getting this idea of depth perception in there. Okay, so I'll go ahead and time lapse this now. I know it's got to be getting a little bit boring here, just doing the same thing. So let me move this along. And then what I'll also do is I'll take the center one here and I'll draw another quick version of the arm around this kind of robot structure. Just to point out why I did this was really to reinforce this concept here, to show you that the forearm, is more noticeably up and around, but not really round. The wrist is better drawn with a box-like prism. You get the radius side, the ulna side, head of the ulna up here. So again, it's just kind of nice to establish it like this for kind of ease of thought. You get the bicep over here, just like, you pretty much just reference this other one right here, the triceps up higher, and the shoulder goes up and over and down. It's not, a lot of times you'll see it where if you draw the shoulder more like this, if somebody's less defined, I guess that can almost make sense, but it's usually not good to do that. It's better to think about it coming up and over and dropping into this area, and this area being, kind of like this. So anyways, I'll draw another version of the arm right there. I guess I already kind of did, but I'll draw a better one. So yeah, so let me time lapse this, add some more value, and draw that arm, and we'll call it good. I hope you enjoyed today's video.